Hi, it's Linda Winter from Martelli. Today I want to take a closer look at our rulers, specifically the type of rulers that we have. Martelli really makes three types of rulers for cutting. Now the cutting part is the real big difference here, and we're talking rulers. I'm going to talk about some of the other things that we have too, just so that there's a good distinction. You guys that know our stuff know the no slip material. This material that's on the back, I say no slipping, no kidding. So when I go to cut, every cut that I make is accurate, consistent, fast and easy. And I can cut more fabric as well. But I want to show you why you would choose one ruler versus another ruler, just so you're aware of the different types of rulers that we have. And you can make better choices about which ones you want to purchase or add to your wish list for somebody else to get for you. So let's talk first about the type of ruler that we came out with first. Our no-slip strip ruler, that's what we used to call this. So if you've seen any of the videos that I've done before, this was black. And we sometimes had a blue or green on the back, but this is the latest version of it. This has strips, slots for your blade, the Martelli rotary cutter blade to go inside. We have 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 1 1/2, 1 1/4, etc. on this ruler, but we make rulers that have strips in different sizes, different shapes, different lengths, different configurations. So we'll look at some of those rulers in a minute. So this first ruler we call the strip rulers. The second type of ruler, if you bought rulers before, if you're a sewer, a quilter, you have rulers that were acrylic, and they're similar to this. This is our straight ruler. These straight rulers, this is a 4x16. They also come in different shapes and sizes, different configurations, but you're going to see there's a straight edge and a straight edge. Sometimes we'll have markings on these rulers and sometimes not. It's all dependent on the project that they're intended for. And rulers are intended for 1,000 different things. So I'll show you some different varieties that we have on these as well and give you some ideas of when you'd want to use these and when you wouldn't. So the second type of ruler we call straight rulers. The third type of ruler we're really going to call a specialty ruler. Specialty rulers, they again have the no slip material on the back and they do specialty things. This ruler right here, this little guy, it comes in a package like this. This is the paper piecing ruler. If you've done any English paper piecing, you know you really need to see your fabric. So we've made this a little bit different because we've got a slot. I'm going to turn this over. We've got a slot and we've got a slot. That way we can line this up and see our fabric. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've got a great video that Sherry did where she's using this. But this is a specialty ruler. I want to show you another ruler that is considered a specialty ruler. This guy here is a multi-purpose slot ruler. There's slots for you to see your fabric. If you notice, none of our rulers are see-through. You can't have see-through when you've got that no-slip material on the back. But we did try to accommodate with this ruler where you can see your fabric. What are we wanting to see in a ruler like this? Where your seams line up. Or if you're trying to do some of my cheater quilting where you've got fabric that has some lines that maybe you want to pretend those are your stitch lines, but we do want to be able to place and position, then we can use this ruler. This ruler, we have a customer that did a video on this, and we'll probably do a video on this in the future. But again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is a specialty ruler. So that's a cool one. Specialty rulers are really based on customer requests and what you guys ask us to do, and if they don't fit in those other categories, the strip ruler or the straight edge ruler, then they're specialty rulers. So I want to show you a ruler that is a ruler and it looks just like our other rulers, but it's not for cutting. These guys here, this, I'm going to pull out another ruler and I want you to see the difference in the width. This guy here is a whole lot thicker in the black. It's really sturdy. It's really going to last you longer than those acrylic rulers. If I broke these, it would be really hard for me to do. Your acrylic rulers, drop it on the floor, you're done. But do you see this ruler here? This is our 2 1/2 by 12. And over here, I've got a 3 by 12. This guy here and this guy, they look similar, but they're different. Not just the handle that's on here. I could put a handle on here. And if you have our pop socket that Martelli makes, you could put it on there too, which is kind of cool. But the thickness here is the difference. The thickness is for your foot of your sewing machine to go along that edge. So this isn't a cutting ruler, this is a sewing ruler. You're going to use this for any ruler work that you do at your sewing machine. If you have a long arm and you want to line up your foot along the edge, you can do that because this is thicker. If you tried to do that with these rulers, our regular rulers, you might have your foot hopping on top of and maybe breaking a needle. And that's not something that we want to do. You can try that with our other rulers and use them as a straight edge, but just realize they're not made for this. These rulers that we're going to be talking about today are for cutting. This ruler, and we have lots of others that are these thicknesses as well, the same thickness, these are for ruler work, for sewing. So at your sewing machine, your home deck, your long arm, using it to line up your foot. And so if you're doing half square triangles, if you wanted to do stitch in the ditch, they come in really handy for that. We're not going to talk about that today either, so I'm going to put this one aside. The other thing we're not going to talk a whole lot about today, but I did want to point out the difference, are templates. Rulers and templates. They're similar, but they're different. The way I categorize a template is that it has a specific purpose. This one that you may have, this is one of our face mask templates. It's our 3D face mask. We have several different sizes. This was a customer request. And like any of our other templates, when I grab, you can see how that grabs my fabric. So when I go to cut, I can literally cut, turn my template, cut, turn my template, cut, 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 done. That template is going to give me exactly that design. So our 3D face mask template will allow us to cut out, here I had 2 layers of fabric, but I could do 10 layers, up to 10 layers because I have straight edges. So templates are a little bit different. This one, as I said, has a specific design, a specific goal. Squares, we make squares and circles and triangles. Those templates, they're used for lots of other things. This one that I've got here is a 5-inch, which is a charm. If you guys have charms and layer cakes, you all know 5-inch and 10-inch. We make charms, but we also make fussy cut frames. We make fussy cut frames to go with our templates, some templates where it really comes in handy. I'm going to open this up and we'll take a look at this fabric. This is not great fabric for me to demonstrate, but it's what I had, so I want you to be able to see. When I move this along the fabric, I know you can't see really well, but I can see that I've got some of the white and gray, some of the white and gray, some of the white and gray, and then my yellow, my green and white. And I can position this to where I think that looks pretty good. This is our fussy cut frame. It doesn't have the material that our no slip material on the back. This does. So I'm going to hold that, place this inside, and when I pop my fabric, that allows me to remove that fussy cut, and I can get cutting exactly what it is I want to do. So some of our templates have fussy cut frames. And again, some of them are more generic. Square, circle, triangles, more generics. Then we make some other templates that are very specific. This is a half square triangle. Our half square triangles are a little bit different, where we've got our markings for our sewing lines, not the cutting lines. If you think about when you've done half square triangles before, some of the techniques that I've used before, they give you where I cut. I want to have the sewing lines. That is what makes the difference. So you can see how this grabs my fabric, just like before. I would grab my 2 layers, and we would do 2, not 10 here. When I place this down, I'm going to take a marking pencil, and I'll draw a line. I like to turn the template in the same position and draw my line. I'll cut, 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 draw the lines, and then when I'm ready to go to the sewing machine, I actually have my stitching lines. So half square triangles are similar but different than what we just looked at. So our templates that we have, they have specific purposes. I have one more that I want to show you just to give you an idea, and everything I'm putting on my chair is falling off, so sorry. My best laid plans there of giving you something there. This is another specialty template that was a customer request. This is our bony template. The bony template, we can place our fabric on the fold. So a lot of our templates work really well by placing the fabric on the fold. But we also made a fussy cut frame. Lisa did some really cute purses, some really cute projects where we wanted to have something centered. So this fussy cut frame works with this as well. So specialty templates. Those templates have projects that you can do. So I want to move on to rulers now and talk about our types of rulers and when you would use one versus another. So the first thing that we can look at is our fabric. Do we have a lot of fabric? Do we have a little bit of fabric? If we're taking fabric off of the bolt, are we going to be cutting cross grain? That's across my fabric. Are we going to be cutting straight of grain? That's the length of my fabric. Are we going to be cutting with our bias, which is at a 45-degree angle? Do I have fabric that's 42 or 44 inches? Normally your quilting cotton fabrics come like that. Or do I have fabric that's wider? This is a 60-inch and it's a stretch. Or do I have something like this where I've got a panel? So we've got lots of decisions that we want to make when we're thinking about which ruler, which template to use. And again, we're going to be talking rulers specifically here. So let's go back to our smaller projects. If we've got squares, if we've got layer cakes, if we've got charms, if we've got fat quarters, if we've got scraps, typically I'm going to go for a smaller ruler. Why? I have less to manipulate, less that I need. Let me show you this. Do you see all of this extra space that I'm dealing with versus here when I go to grab? This is easier for me to manipulate and for me to move. But it's all based on what you have at home. If this is a ruler that you have, then we want to work with, whether it's larger fabric or smaller fabrics, we want to work with that ruler. What I really want you to know is which rulers, if you're thinking about adding to your repertoire of Martelli rulers, which are the rulers that will work best for your needs. So let's talk about our straight rulers first. I want to show this ruler and a few other rulers that we have too, and we'll take a closer look at these. If you're new to Martelli rulers, you're probably thinking, I can't see my fabric. It's not see-through. That's the same thing that I thought, but I can promise you this no-slip material is going to take all those issues, all those concerns away. First off, they're created on a CAD program. What does that mean? Every cut, every measurement that we have here will be accurate and consistent. So when you use our rulers to cut, every cut you get will be accurate and consistent. Secondly, this no-slip material, no slipping, no kidding. I only have 2 layers of fabric here, but I could have 10 layers. I could have 20 layers really, and it will all grab. When we go to cut with a straight edge, I already mentioned about 10 is the limit that we want for the 45mm rotary cutter. This is the 45mm, and this is a left-handed. I'm going to be working with the left hand, but I'll pull over the right-handed and show you as well. And then we'll look at the differences between the 45mm and the 60mm too, so you'll know about that. So back to rulers are created on a CAD program. Then they're cut on a laser machine. Everything about what we do is built for accuracy, consistency, and fast and easy. The other thing too is that all of this working on our mat, our mats are accurate and consistent as well. So you're actually going to be using the mat to measure, to line up our rulers. And I'll show you about that, especially when we get to our strip rulers. So back to the ruler. If you're going to be buying a ruler for the first time around and you're not so comfortable with the no-slip material, not seeing your ruler, this 4x16 ruler is a good one for you to purchase first. Why? It's like the rulers that you already own. The 4x16 in acrylic is a pretty common ruler. So if you own a 4x16 ruler where you can see through your fabric or see through the ruler to see your fabric, then this is a really good one for you to think about. The other reason why I like it so much is it's great for bigger fabrics, it's great for smaller fabrics, and it works beautifully with our turntable. And when I place this on here, you can see how it still grabs that fabric, but when I go to cut and I position this ruler is going to work beautifully. So this is a good one for you to think about. I want to show you a few features on this ruler that will be a little bit different than some of our other rulers. You'll see that our rulers are all a little bit different, but I want to point out some of the consistencies. So on this ruler, the material, whether it's black or white, you're going to see engravings. Now those engravings are harder to see. I'm going to change this so you can see the 2.5 by 12 inch. That's hard to see. So Martelli really kind of took a clue from customers that were marking with metallic markers. And Martelli now offers 2 metallic markers. We've got silver and we've got gold. I'm going to pull over one of the silver ones. And with the silver one, with a ruler that's 2.5 by 12, I can go in and color those. I'm just going to color the X so you can see. When I go draw that line, I would take the time to color 2.5 and to color 12 so you can see what it is. But the other thing that's really cool about this is you can line this up on your mat, and by placing this on your mat, I can go in and draw numbers on here. I could draw a line, a line, a line. And guess what? I have a video on that. The video is showing the 2 by 12. This little guy here, boy, is this a workhorse. And the same thing with the 2.5 by 12 inches. We've got 12 inches in length, 2 inches in width, 2.5 inches in width. What you'll see me do on this ruler is line it up and draw my marks on here so I can have 1/2 inch marks or inch marks. That way I can use the ruler and do a little bit more measuring with it. I've learned to use my mat, and my mat just makes me feel really comfortable because, again, they're true and accurate. I can trust the measurements. But if you're not there yet, you can add markings on here. This ruler, the 4 by 16, you can see those markings there. If you want them to be a little bit darker, then you can take the metallic and go color those in. So I'm going to put these aside for just a second, and I want to pull over a couple other rulers. These guys are our skinny minis. Now these are skinny minis shorter sets, and you can see this guy already has markings. These are 1 inch marks. This will show you it's 1 inch across. I'm going to turn it this way so you all can see the 1 inch across with the arrow. We've got on here 1.5 inch. We've got a 2. We've got a 2.5 inch. These right here are the mini skinny minis. These are our short rulers, and they are 1 by 16, 2 by 16, 2.5 by 16, and then we have the 1.5 by 16. All of these are 16 inches. These are minis, the skinny minis, shorter sets, and they have marks on them for your inches. I want to pull over our original skinny minis. These original skinny minis, these guys here, these are all 24 inches in length. And when we look at this, I can see my 1.5 by 24, but they're 24 inches and they don't have our markings. If you like the idea of the 16-inch ones, then you can take this to your mat and draw those lines on here. Again, use your mat. When you get comfortable, using that mat will be a no-brainer, really. But until you get to that point, you may want to go ahead and mark. The skinny minis, 1.5 by 24, 2 by 24, 2.5 by 24, 3 by 24, 3.5 by 24. These are really, really practical. I'm going to show you those in just a second. I want to show you another set of rulers. Boy, do these come in handy. 1 by 6 and 2 by 6. So 1 inch, 2 inch, and then 6 inch in length. And these again have the markings. G and Sherry, they've done a bunch of videos using these, and they've also gone in and they've colored in their rulers too, as you can see here. So we can use not only inch marks, but we also have 1/2 inch marks on here too. So it's really up to you on how much you want to have those markings. If you're doing box pleats on little zipper bags, these really come in handy. If you're doing our trinket baskets that are made from the hexagons, these come in really handy. I'm going to put these aside and not spend a lot of time on these because smaller projects or smaller things, darts, your box pleats, those kinds of things, you're going to find these really come in handy. I want to come back to the skinny minis. I mentioned that 4 by 16 ruler first. The 4 by 16 and the skinny minis are just some of our rulers that we call straight edge rulers. Why would I want to use a straight edge ruler? Let me grab, here's a 2.5 inch by 24, and then I'm going to grab my favorite tool in all the world. You've heard me say that if you've watched any of my videos. This was my favorite tool in all the world. Why? Because it was the first time that I had a ruler that I could say, oh my gosh, no slipping, no kidding. Do you see from here to here? I'm going to bring right down here, and there's a 2.5. Now it's facing me, so I'm looking at it, and that's right where it should be. And over here, here's my 2.5 here. From here to here with my strip, that's going to give me 2.5 inches. But here's a big difference between straight edge rulers and strip rulers. When I look at my fabric off of a bolt, I've got 22, maybe 21, maybe 22.5 inches in the width of my fabric. It's all based on how that fabric is cut. This ruler from here to here, I've really got about a 17 or so inch cut, depending on which of the rotary cutters we're using. The 45 millimeter will start a little bit further back. The 60 millimeter will start a little bit further. And again, I'll show you that in a few minutes. But you can see here this grab. So when I go to cut, if I'm lining up on my mat and I go to cut this, when I go to cut, I'm able to cut from edge to edge. This is my fold. This is my selvage. I'm able to cut all of that fabric and I don't have to fold that in half. So skinny minis are straight rulers. When I have a ruler that's 24 inches in length, I can place it on my fabric and cut, and I don't have to do any additional folding. This is 2.5 inches, so if I wanted to cut here, I can actually, believe it or not, cut right along here as well by holding this down because of that no slip strip ruler. This, or the no slip material on the back side. So that allows me to cut. If I used any other ruler, I would be bearing down hoping that ruler doesn't move on me. And the further away we get, the more it's going to move. So again, we'll talk more about this in a second. I want to pull over 2 other rulers. And these guys over here, these are similar to our skinny minis. I've got a 19 by 6 inch, and I'm going to turn that a little bit so hopefully you can see my 19 by 6 inch. I've got another ruler. This is a 24-inch ruler. And again, this might look very similar to some of the rulers that you have. This is 6 inches in width. This is 24 inches in length. So we make these rulers to, again, be able to cut. If you've done a lot of 6-inch blocks, it's a really popular size in quilting, we would take this out of the package and I could cut and cut, move the ruler and cut, move the ruler and cut 6-inch strips with this. And my 24 inches is going to accommodate my cross grain of my fabric. All right, so let's take a look at cutting with this. What are we going to do? We're talking straight rulers first. I'm looking at my fabric here along the mat, and I want to make sure that my fold is folded pretty correctly. You get your fabric off of the bolt, and it's not always folded correctly. So I'm looking at my blue line right here, and I'm looking along, and I'm seeing that looks pretty good. I would actually get right in front of the camera to see and make sure that this was lined up accurately as well. I can't trust this cut because that came from whoever cut this fabric last. So this fold and this fold, those are the 2 things that I care about. And again, I would get over there and make sure everything was good. I want to first square up. I'm going to grab my 3 inches. I want to first square off my fabric. So I'm going to look at this line right here. And my darker blue, that's a 1/2 inch mark. I'm going to place that on there because I don't want to waste any fabric. I would take the time to make sure and look on the back side that that fabric is lined up, and I'd look here and I would look here. Now when I move my ruler, can you see this hand here? I'm holding this in place because if I move the ruler, that no slip material, it's grabbing my fabric. So when I position my ruler, I'm holding that down. I'm looking and I see I need to move it over a little bit. So I'm going to hold and I scoot here. When I think I've got that pretty good, I'm going to again check up here and I'm ready to cut. So I'm looking at my line, I'm looking at my line, and then I'm going to cut. I'm going to use the Martelli 45mm rotary cutter. And again, we make a right-handed and we make a left-handed. And everything that you're doing, ruler-wise, template-wise, we always recommend you use the Martelli rotary cutter. Why? It's made to work with this. This space from here to here, the blade, that's going to go right along the edge of the template. When I go to cut, that space here, that depth of the blade, that's going to allow me to cut. That's why this right here, this material, and our no-slip material, the black material and the no-slip material, there is a reason why we've used this depth or this width of the fabric, this height of this fabric, because that works beautifully along here with the amount of fabric that you're going to cut. So what do I want to do? I want to place my hand so that I'm on my ruler, but also on my fabric a little bit. Now, if you're using an acrylic ruler, you would have had a death grip with your pinky. And that's why my pinky has a little bit of arthritis in it from all the years that I used other rulers. With this, I don't need to. So I just kind of dance around. As I go to cut, I can move my hand up as I cut if I want to. The further away I get, the more I want to have my hand closer. So we're going to go ahead and start to cut. And as I cut, I'm hugging the ruler. I don't tilt my blade that away. Good luck with that. And the other thing too is I'm cutting from where my shoulder is. We don't cut from the middle of our body. I don't need to. Because when I cut from my shoulder, the ruler is right there in front of me. The no-slip material is grabbing. If I cut this way in front of my body, which we've been taught to do because of acrylics, that blade's going to be at an angle, and I really am bearing down, and I'm pushing into my mat, and I'll say, and good luck with that. You're going to eat up your mat, you're going to bend that blade a little bit, and you're going to tend to go off that away. So what we want to do is where our shoulder is natural. So I started to cut, I'm going to move my hand along, and I continue to cut, and as I get further, I cut. So I've got a nice straight edge. I can again cut about 10 layers. I like to cut about 8 layers typically when I'm cutting a quilting cotton fabric. Now, if I'm cutting 3 inches of strips, I can move to the other side of the table, but I can also cut along this edge. This isn't a beginner first time move. This is something that you learn with comfort. So if you're not so comfortable with this, then go ahead and move to the other side of the template and cut. I'm going to show you how to do, instead of a 3 by 24, we're going to do a different measurement in just a minute. So what do I want to do? I want to do 3 by 24 first. And again, this is me thinking about what it is that I'm doing. As I cut, I'm hugging that ruler. I'm right here. I'm not tilting this way. I'm not tilting this way. My hand can either be behind or in front. You'll see as I move, I'm going to keep that hand in a good position, close to that blade. As I cut, do you see how I'm moving my hand along? And as I cut, I'm going to get an accurate, consistent cut as well. So the ruler allows us to cut both on the right side and on the left side, depending on whether you're left-handed or right-handed. All right, so I want to show you how we can, and by the way, to lift up, do you see what I just did? We're lifting up, that releases, and I'm holding down here. If I wanted to leave that fabric and reposition my ruler, I could do that. So what do? I'm going to scoot this down a little bit so I can get this in a good position for me. I've got a straight edge now, so I could take advantage of that straight edge. I don't have to square off. And now we want to look at if I wanted to do a 6 by 24. So I've got 24. And right here would be 3 inches. I want to do 3 more inches. I could do the math and do 24 minus 6 is 18, or I could literally pick this up and just scoot it over. So I can scoot over here and cut just like I did, or I can bring this right to my 18. I'm looking at the line, and I want to get that nice in position. And notice I'm holding my fabric, and I continue to get that just where I want. And now I can do what I would be doing with this ruler. Sometimes you need a particular ruler, but sometimes you can make a ruler work for you. So my 3 by 24 does beautiful 3 by 24s, but it can also do 6 by 24 or 5 by 24 or whatever, just by using your mat. When I go to cut, I would get that perfect 6 by 24. So the strip rulers allow me, the straight rulers allow me to cut right along that edge. That's the beautiful thing about all of these guys. Choose with the skinny minis whether I want the 1.5 or the 2 or the 3 or the 3.5. I've got over here my 2.5. So 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. All of these rulers are our skinny mini sets. These are made to cut cross grain. I could also cut straight of grain with these as well by turning them this way. But the real advantage of the skinny minis is taking advantage of the width of the fabric. If I had scraps and I wanted to do something similar on the turntable, these would work beautifully. On smaller pieces of fabric, your layer cakes, your jelly rolls, those kinds of things. Layer cakes, I'd want to fold the fabric because I only have 16 inches. But these would work pretty much like the skinny minis, but we'd be working on a smaller scale, cutting along the edge. Same thing with all of these rulers. We're going to be cutting along the edge with this. So when you go to cut, lifting up, I want to go back and show you just the lifting up and moving that over. And sorry, I thought I had this out of the package. We'll get this out. And do you see how my 24-inch ruler, I line this up. I'm going to position this. I'm going to position this. And when I want to move this ruler, if I'm making a cut and making a cut and making a cut and I don't want to reposition my fabric, make sure you've got enough room laid out and that fabric is nice and smooth. We would cut and we would cut, we would lift up. Notice what I'm doing, I'm holding that ruler down because that no-slip material is grabbing and we would lift that up. We would have finished right here on that 17.5. So what I would do once I made that cut is lift that up and bring this over to that 17.5 where I would have made that cut and reposition that just like that and cut and lift the ruler and scoot, scoot, scoot. So that's how you can cut multiple widths. This one, 24 inches is the width, the length, 6 inches is the width. So these are our straight edge rulers and people love, love, love the straight edge rulers. I want to show you the no slip strip rulers next and show you the difference. So if you own one of our tables, then you own these rulers. So this ruler, or something very similar, was the very first ruler that we came out with. This has our strips, as I mentioned before, and from here to here, I've got 2.5 inches. When I turn my ruler around, I've got 2.25 inches. I've got an inch. I've got an 1.5 inches. I've got a 7/8. When I add my 7/8 and my 1 5/8, then I've got 2.5. My inch and my 1.25 inches, I've got 2.25. So this is a multi-ruler. We've got multi-widths on this one. This guy first, then this one next. 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. There's an 1.5 inches. There's another 1/2 inch. There's another inch, 1/2 inch. We've got 2.5 inches. I've got, with a 10-inch ruler, from here to here is 10 inches, I've got 2.5 inches 4 times. So if you're doing bindings, if you're doing jelly rolls, this ruler, they both are possible for you to do that. These came with your table. You may be thinking, what do I do with these rulers? So I want to show you a few things about this and a few differences. Before we get to what the rulers do, let's talk about the markings. This ruler has multiple markings. On this side here, I've got exactly the same markings as on the other side. How we use the ruler, whether we're left-handed or right-handed, is how we'll look at this ruler. And Zeke's done a perfect job of zooming in on there. But if you want to see those better at home on your own, get one of our markers and go color those in. The other thing I highly recommend coloring in are these lines. Those lines, those are critical for me when I'm doing measurements. From here to here, I've got an inch, and I use this mark and line them on my mat, and I use those quite a bit. So color those in so I can see that those will line up with the edge of your mat and the markings on your mat. So those are going to be really important. So this ruler has markings on it. I'm going to come over to the black ruler, and I want you to see there are some markings, but not a lot of markings, and markings in different places. You can see I've got markings here. So I've got a 1 inch right here, from here to here. A 1.5 inch from here to here. So 1 is an inch right here, adding another 1/2 inch. Then I've got 2 inches over here. We're not going to mark each one of these. It's just not necessary, because what you do today might be totally different than what you do tomorrow. So this marking pen that you use, I'm probably not going to be using that on this. This side, we're starting with 1/2 inches. This side is a little bit different. You may want to, if you're going to mark anything, is maybe mark this line right here. Why? Because I've got 2 inches. So if I want to do specific measurements on here and I want to take advantage of this, this guy right over here has 2 inches. If I wanted to cut 9 inches, and I'm starting over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oops, I can't get over here. So if I wanted to do 9 inches, I'm going to turn the ruler around, and now I could do 9 inches by cutting from here to here. So the reason I point that out is this one area right down here is where I would mark that, just to be able to say, here's my 2 inches, or you can mark the 2 inches here, because where I use that 2 inch will help me or will hinder me, whether I put that left or right. So I mentioned that I don't want to mark this ruler, and I certainly don't want to do this. Sorry to whoever marked this, but this doesn't help me out, because this gives me 1 through 8, then I've got my 2 inches over here. But if I wanted to do 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, those measurements that are here for me, here's 1, we've got that. There's my 2, we've got that, 2.5. So if I wanted to do 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, I'm going to right here put my blade from here to here. I would cut and cut. And then I would want to do another 1, 2, 2.5. Well, 2.5 plus 2.5 equals 5. Okay, I can do that. But then I go to 1, 2, 2.5. I have to do a little bit of math. What I'd rather you do than put these markings on here with a metallic pen, I'd rather you grab a chalk pencil. A chalk pencil, we're going to start on the 2. If I want to do 2.5, I'm going to take a chalk pencil and I'll put a mark there. And I'm going to come right back to the other side and put a mark over here. So there's my 2.5. I want to do 1, 2, 2.5. And what do? Put a chalk pencil mark here. And I want to come back to that other end and put a chalk pencil mark there. And then I do my next 2.5. 1, 2, 2.5. and I'm going to put a chalk pencil mark there and a chalk pencil mark here. And that allows me, when I cut that last one, to get 4 widths of 2.5. Today, I'm doing 2.5. Tomorrow, I don't want to do 2.5, so I wipe off my mark for the 2.5. I wipe off my mark for the 2.5. I wipe off my mark for the 2.5. The same thing on the other end. And then now I can do my marks for 2. There's 2. There's 1, 2. Put a mark, put a mark. This ruler is multi-purpose based on what I'm doing each project. This ruler is multi-purpose based on the widths that are here. I've got 2 1/4, I've got 1 1/4, I've got 1 5/8, I've got 7/8. I really can't do those very well with this ruler. So when you're doing those measurements, we'd use this ruler. So this ruler, our multi-use ruler, multi-measurements, we used to call it the no-slip strip ruler. It's got multiple widths. It allows me to do more options. This, our 1/2-inch ruler, is made up of a half, a half, a half, a half. So we've got great videos on this. The guys that do our videos on our tables, they spend a lot of time showing you how not only to cut inch strips, but lift the ruler and reposition and cut inch blocks, which is amazing with this. I want to show you a few of the differences between these rulers and some of the other rulers that we have and those straight edge rulers that we looked at earlier. So when would I use a strip ruler versus a straight edge ruler? I love strip rulers when we're doing multiple widths and when I've got smaller pieces of fabric. This width of my fabric, 44, 42 inches, based on the fabric, is not going to work as easily with these rulers. Why? Because from where my blade starts cutting to where it ends up cutting is about 17 inches or so. I've got 22 inches. One of the things you can do to get around that is cut your length of your fabric, fold it in half, and now I've got 4 pieces of fabric. Basically, I would take the time to make sure that I've folded nicely, carefully. Do you see how this doesn't match and this does? So I'd make sure that I had that lined up and consistent. And if you have to press your fabric after you've washed it, if you've washed your fabric, you definitely will want to press your fabric. But if you have to change the folds that are already there from the store, then take the time to do that, especially if you're going to be cutting binding strips. So I look up here and I look down here. When I take my ruler, either ruler, when I place this down, I'm going to place this right here. Now I really would be further over here, but you get the idea. What do? I cut, and then if I'm doing my 2.5, go to the chalk cut, go to the chalk cut, go to the chalk cut, and then cut along that edge. So that's one way to use the ruler. But the real question is cross grain or straight of grain. If you're doing binding and you need a little bit of stretch, cross grain does have stretch in the fabric. Bias is what we've been taught to do, but cross grain does have stretch in the fabric, so you can do that. I don't like stretch in my binding, so I like to cut straight of grain. So if I'm going to cut my fabric and it's binding fabric that I'm using, you're going to want to cut the length of your fabric and you're going to fold that fabric. When we fold, we want to think 17 inches or less. So I'm going to line that up. I'm going to line that up, and when I place this down, I'm going to make sure that everything is nice and consistent. If you want to see this in real action, I have a video that we did years and years ago where I take the time to make sure everything is lined up and everything is lined up. There's the selvage that I want to get rid of, and if I'm going to do 2.5, I'll place that ruler along, and if this is the ruler that you have, we would cut and cut. If you have this ruler, I'm turning my ruler around. Now I want you to see what I just did on this ruler. This ruler, I mentioned that we have the 2 inches on one side, and then everything else is a half of an inch. On this ruler, when I look at my ruler as a lefty, I'm looking from the left side in. Right-handed, you're looking from the right side in. If we want to cut 2.5 inches, where I am left-handed here, from here to here is 2.5 inches. If you're right-handed, from here to here is 2.5 inches. Right-handed, you're over here. Left-handed, I'm over here. But if we wanted to cut 2.5, I'm going to turn that ruler around. If I wanted to do 2 1/4, I'm going to turn that ruler around. From here to here, do you see my measurement is 2 1/4 inches? So based on whether I'm doing 2 1/4, 2.5, 3 inches, 1 1/4, 1 5/8, I'm going to turn that ruler in the direction that works for me. Left-handers look to the left in, Right-handers look from the right in. So we change our ruler position based on whether we're left-handed or right-handed. I have the video that will show you how to cut those binding strips. So when you go to cut and cut, lift up that ruler, reposition to where you just cut, 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 or using this ruler and cutting, cutting, cutting. Cross grain fabric versus straight of grain fabric, you'll want to think about cutting which way you like, but if you're going to be cutting straight of grain and you want to cut your your straight of grain bindings, these rulers to me are the way to go. But I want to show you one of the new rulers that we came out with that are similar, because we make lots of strip rulers. So Valerie really worked hard at putting together rulers to meet customers' needs. So we made a ruler that's a jelly roll ruler. That's what this guy is. The jelly roll ruler from here to here. Do you see my 1 inch? I'm going to bring this up and have you all see from here to here I've got 1 inch. And then I've got 1.5 inches. And again, those metallic markers, yeah, that's perfect. The metallic markers will really help. So from here to here, I've got my 1 inch. From here to here, I've got 2.5. So if I'm going to cut 2.5 inch, I've got 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. This jelly roll ruler is ideal. It's jelly rolls for 2.5, but it also does binding strips. And if you wanted to do 1.5 inch strips or 1 inch strips, you could do that as well. But what really makes this ruler different than these guys is the length. So you can see, and Zeke's going to pull back a little bit. So you can see this ruler is 24 inches in length, and this ruler is 30, I think. I'm going to put it on the mat just to make sure. 32 inches. Okay, so we have some rulers that are 30 inches. From edge to edge in the length, we have 32 inches. That means these slots that are here, let me show you this 1 inch. It starts a little bit further up, but look how far that 1.5 inches down. So my 2.5 inch here, we've got almost from here to here. Let's put it on our mat, and we've got about 28 inches that we can cut. So you need 22 inches to be able to cut your bindings cross grain. With this, if we're doing straight of grain fabric, this ruler to be able to cut and not have to fold my fabric so often, this is amazing. If you do 2.5 inch a lot and you like to have fabric that you've folded, you wanted to do straight of grain, this is a ruler for you to think seriously about. Now I want to show you this ruler and show you this ruler too. We're going to talk a little bit about the way the rulers come to you and what you need to do with the strip rulers. This ruler, when I turn it over, you can see those strips are already cut. This is one that we did. When the ruler comes to you, whatever the ruler is, it comes like this on the front. The black, they've already been cut by the laser machine. This has been cut. Our guys in the back, they're going to glue on this brown material, the no-slip material. And what do you need to do? We need to cut those strips. I always say take your old junky rotary cutter, one that you don't use anymore, and I'm going to grab one here, and we'll cut. Now this is my good rotary cutter. Why do I not want to use my good one? There's glue in between here. If you do this and you cut all of yours, for instance on the 10 inch, this guy here, which is our 1/2 inch ruler, I've got lots of slots there, lots of glue. You'll want to clean your rotary cutter. I'm going to cut, and then I'll cut. I'm just going to do 2 so I can show you what I just did to these. We cut between the black, but it's cutting the brown. So our strip rulers, you're going to need to cut the brown material. And again, right in between here, there's a little bit of glue. That didn't do a lot of damage to this rotary cutter, but if you're cutting a lot of rulers, we don't want to get any glue on here because that's going to affect how it cuts with your fabric. Cut all of your strips so that you can use that ruler. What's so nice and so powerful about these rulers from the other rulers that are out there is what we call zero tolerance. You've probably heard David talk about this quite a bit, and me too. From time to time, this ruler here, this slot that's here, from time to time we've talked about zero tolerance and perfect. I want you to see you don't see my hand through there. If you think about other acrylic rulers that are on the market that have strips in them, not only do they have acrylic with no slip material, no slip material on the back, which means they're going to wiggle, but they also have a little bit of a gap. When there's a little bit of a gap with a ruler that slips on you, the further away you cut from your body, even with my hand on the table and me holding tightly, the further away, the more that ruler is going to move on you. You've really got to bear down on that. And when there's a little bit of a gap in between the slots, that gives room for your blade to go a little bit off. And when you go a little bit off, you're going to get a zig at the end. You're going to get a zag at the beginning. And that means if I folded my fabric, the folds here, they're not going to be perfectly straight when I open those up. I don't need binding strips with a little bit of a dip in my fabric. With this, what we call zero tolerance, any of our rulers that have these strips, you'll see there's no gap in between. How do we know that for sure? This material was brand new solid. You're cutting it, and when you cut it, just like I did a minute ago, it's only the depth of the blade. That's the only depth that you have between here. So every cut that you get will be exactly the same. Every cut that you get will give you no zig, no zag. So our strip rulers, that no slip material makes all the difference. I have a couple other rulers I want to show you, but since we're talking about this, I want to show you the blade. With our rotary cutter, I mentioned the 45 millimeter. I mentioned Martelli's rotary cutter. I want to talk about the 45 millimeter and the 60 millimeter. When I place my blade inside, this guy here, when we go forward, you notice where I am here, by the way, my hand has no room for me to hold this ruler here. So if I wanted to cut like that, I'm going to turn the ruler around, and that gives me all of this room for my fingers to go in. And I think I was at the 1.5. And do you see how this, it's not moving anywhere. I'm pushing the table, it's not going anywhere. But when I go to cut, I have plenty of room. But I want to show you the amount of blade that's going to come through. It doesn't look like a lot, but that amount of blade right there will let me cut about 10 layers of quilting cotton fabric. Quilting cotton fabric, 10 layers, that's a lot of fabric. Now, fabric that's stacked. If we're folding our fabric, every time we fold the fabric, there's a little bit of air in between, and so I count the folds as another layer of fabric. So if we're folding the fabric, we're not going to be able to cut as much. So if we are wanting to cut more fabric, then this 60 millimeter, this big guy here, I call this the buzz saw. Let me show you with this. Do you see how much blade that is? All that fabric underneath, and I'm going to be able to cut a lot of fabric underneath. So this is the buzz saw. There's a time and a place for the 45 millimeter. There's a time and a place for the 60 millimeter. If you're going to be using our strip rulers and you're going to be cutting a lot of fabric, that's one of the reasons why you love these strip rulers, you probably want to invest in that 60 millimeter rotary cutter. I want to show you another set of rulers that have strips that are longer that you'll really want to think about using that 60 millimeter as well. So strip rulers, we talked about the 1/2-inch ruler, we talked about the multi-width ruler, and now I want to talk about these guys. These are seam allowance rulers. So the seam allowance rulers are fairly new, and we've had customers do such a great job of showing projects and pictures and videos of things that they've created with these. So I want to go over these and talk about why you'd want to use these versus some of the other rulers. So the first thing that we would notice is that we've got 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches. On each of these rulers in the center, I've got solid inches. So there's 3 inches on each one. And again, when you get the ruler, you're going to cut all the way through. You can see this one is not cut. When I lift this one, these are all cut. So cut these rulers up, and then you'll see the 3 inches in the center. Let's talk about what makes each one unique. We've got 1 1/4 and 3/8. I'm going to show you this so that we can see with the metallic markers. Right here, we've got the 1 1/4, and all you need is to just color it in. It looks fuzzy there, but it's nice and clear here. 1 1/4 and 3/8. This is our smallest ruler. Then we have the 1 1/2, and we have 3/4. And then we have a 7/8, and we have a 5/8. And depending on how you turn the ruler, now I have 5/8 and 7/8. So what are we going to be doing with these? Well, I can do 1, 2, 3. So if I need to do 3 inches of something, just cutting. If I need to do 2 inches of something, just cutting. If I want to do 1 inch of something, just cutting, I can use any of these rulers. But what makes these really special is that 1 1/4, 3/8, or 1 1/2, 3/4, or 5/8 and 7/8. So when you're doing half square triangles, when you're squaring off a project, when you want to do a sashing or a border, when you've got something like this that's a panel and we wanted to cut and we want those cuts to be accurate, that's where we're going to choose, do I want an additional 3/8 or do I need an additional 1/2 or an additional 3/4? You choose based on that extra. So if I wanted to cut 2 1/4, 2 1/4, 2 1/4, I can use the seam allowance rulers for that. So I'd simply be able to cut from here to here is my 1/4 inch. And from here to here, there's my 2 inch. So I can place my fabric down and cut and cut. And that's going to give me 2 1/4. Move the ruler along, cut another 2 1/4, move the ruler, cut another 2 1/4. I can fold my fabric if I want to, but because these rulers are so long, I may not necessarily have to fold my fabric, especially if you're doing cross grain. The idea with the rulers really came from clothing. Clothing, we tend to use different seam allowances in our projects. A 5/8 inch is what I grew up using. So if I were using something with a pattern that had a 5/8, I'd probably grab this ruler. I've got my 5/8 plus an inch, plus another inch, plus another inch. So I could cut 3 5/8. 2 5/8, 1 5/8. So you're going to look to see what seam allowances you typically use, what strips you typically use, do you have widths that you typically cut, and then you'll choose which ruler you'll use. Because they're longer in length, they're a lot more versatile, but you also have 3 rulers that you've got to choose from. Which one do you choose? Well, I'd say buy them all because I think you'll need them all, especially if you're doing half square triangles, all those projects that I just listed. These are new. We're going to do a video specifically on these coming to show you these in action, but I think you'll really enjoy those. And again, think about doing the markers on your rulers as well. One last ruler that I wanted to talk about is the Tsquare ruler. If you have one of our tables, you most likely have the Tsquare ruler. This Tsquare ruler is a slat ruler. This is the newer style. If you have one of the older ones, we didn't have this cut down the middle. 5 inches, and now we have 2 1/2 and 2 1/2, which is kind of a neat feature. But this is really what makes this unique. We've got angles down here, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees, 60 degrees. You can set this at whatever angle you want with the knob, and then this, in some of our tables, we have a slot where this can go right inside. But most of our tables, you'd actually butt this right up against the edge, tighten this up so it gives you whatever degree it is you want, and you can cut. So this is a specialty ruler, but it's also a strip ruler too. So the Tsquare is one of those really neat additions for squaring up your projects, for if you're going to be cutting a lot of strips, changing the angle of the table, sitting down at the end and cutting and cutting and cutting. 2 1/2 inch, 5 inch on that ruler, quite a bit. So that's kind of a nice feature too. So just to wrap up what we talked about today, Martelli makes 3 types of rulers. All of them have the no-slip material, so every cut you get is accurate, consistent. The strip rulers, that's where we place our rotary cutter blade inside. 0 tolerance, you can see every cut you're going to get is perfect, accurate, and you don't need to see through that ruler. Trust the no-slip material, trust your mat, and let them do the work for you. We have some great videos that will show you in more detail how these rulers work. If you're going to go for the big guns, then the 1/2 inch ruler and also the longer rulers really allow you to cut a lot of fabric accurately and consistently. So the strip rulers, a little bit of a learning curve there, but boy, once you get there, you're going to fall in love. Then we have the straight rulers. The straight rulers, skinny minis, the 4x16 or 6 inch. And guess what? We'll make rulers to your specific needs too. So we have a lot of people that say, I need a 24 by a 7, a 24 by whatever. We can make those for you. These are most like what you're used to, where you're cutting along the edge. So take advantage of that and definitely pick up one of our metallic markers to be able to mark your rulers too. The third type of ruler that we talked about are specialty rulers. The specialty rulers, things like our paper piecing ruler. Different rulers that do very specific kinds of things, we'll have videos on those individually. And then the ruler that really isn't a cutting ruler. The rulers that are thicker, that are used for all of your ruler work at your sewing machine, at your home deck machine, at your long arm sit down machine. These really come in handy, but we're going to be sewing along the edge. I hope this has given you some great information. We would love for you to share this video, to add some comments, to like the video, and let us know what you think. Thanks for watching, and make your list, because I know you're going to find rulers that you're going to need to add to your collection. Thanks for watching.